All right, we are doing another demo of assignment 3. This time it will be a content-specific portrait where the background and the character or the figure's relationship to that background is very important. This would be true of doing a portrait of an artist in their studio or doing a musician, in their with their band, with all their equipment around. Here I'm choosing to work from a Caspar David Friedrich romantic German painting from the 19th century. It's called The Wanderer, and it's about kind of the vastness of nature. And the shots that I got that were inspired by it are in the Grand Canyon National Park. And that's my 6-year-old son, Ruben. And the nice thing about using Ruben here is he's not as tall as a full-grown man, so I can have him take up a lot of space while still not having to have an extreme wide-angle lens or having to get a lot of careful distance from this. The problem is, how do we match the format? You can see from my sketch here with the third lines that my subject matter here, the little boy, is too low. His head isn't nearing that top third line. So what I did is I opened up the photo, and then I grew the canvas size around my original photo, and I grew it to go underneath and to the sides because I knew I needed to add format here. Now, it's much easier just to crop into your photo to get your desired format, but when you need to extend your format, that's when you hope that you have other exposures. And sure enough, I have other exposures from that time, exposures of myself, exposures of my wife, where I got a little bit more of the platform that we were standing on, the rock wall here. It's not quite as romantic as this rock outcropping. So what do? Well, I need to cut this part out and then duplicate it onto its own layer. So that's what I have here, just like we did with the exquisite corpse. You can see my feet there. And the idea is I'm trying to match the format. So because I shot these the same day, the same rough time, the same angle, the lighting, the coloring, everything should match. The same camera. In fact, this is a little bit in better focus, perhaps, than my original exposure. So yeah, slightly blurry there because it's in right at the edges of the digital sensor. Whereas this is more towards the middle of the sensor, it's a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to be compositing these frames now. How do I do that? I first do kind of a rough selection, just like we did with the jumping exquisite corpse. I'm going to delete my feet. Oops. Then I'm going to line it up. Slightly different viewpoint on everything. I enlarged it slightly so it kind of fill in. And now I'm going to go in and erase the edges using a 100 opacity brush, fairly hard, fairly large and controllable. Just to get that edge off between the two different exposures. Now, whenever they do a cover shoot for a magazine, they'll always do what's called shoot for coverage. So they'll shoot the model lots of different ways, and then very often the cover itself is composited from those multiple exposures, kind of like I'm doing here. Now, as you can see, if I overlay the painting, whoops, where's the painting? Up here. On top of this to fit the width of my exposure, and then I map that with guides, to draw it for me, you can see that I have enough just from those two exposures to give me the height and the width to match the format of the painting. And then, am I lining up my figure? Yes, indeed. So, Caspar David Friedrich's Wanderer, his head hits there, his feet hit right there. And in my photo, head hits there, the feet go just below there. But I don't want to have to shrink it more, or I'd have to build up content I don't have on each side. So that's going to work pretty well as long as I build up this ground. But there's a problem. The problem is simply that where my foot was, there's a big hole right there. This one's pretty much taken care of. I can erase that out and still have it in my exposure, but from here down I've got nothing. So I need to go back to my shots from that day, from that location. And see some of the others I took, like this one. And hope that they weren't standing in the same place. Move that down. See, it's covering up the hole, but I need to see where it is. Alright, so move this around, and sure enough, I've got that hole covered right there. But I'm not going to try to take this whole photo out, though I kind of like the stacking of these rocks. That's looking more interesting now. But I have all of that to access should I need it to fill in certain areas. Now I need to make sure that my figure comes clearly through. And I could do that by erasing this away, but maybe it's safer to just outline around my figure. Give him a wide berth. And duplicate him onto his own layer, on top of everything. And then set his feet on top. So now I have a figurative layer, right? I'm not replacing the background, but this allows me to treat him differently than I treat the background. So for instance, if I need to light him a little bit differently, in Caspar David Friedrich's, the foreground figure, even though it's a painting, is backlit very strongly, so he's darker. So I might take the exposure down, for instance, of my foreground figure. See how it will make it more dramatic. So that's the kind of freedom that gives me. But for now, I just want to use it to blend him into the surroundings. Take my eraser, slightly low opacity. Soft edge. And transition. This rock at his feet. Organic materials are much easier to play with this way than man-made materials. Okay, and it even looks like he has a shadow there. Very nice. Okay, so I have just accomplished extending my format by adding this stuff in. By taking similar exposures, slightly different angles for slightly different coverage, bringing them together. And then compositing them like they're double exposures, but in a very systematic and intentional way. Hopefully to look a little bit more interesting. Fortunately, there's a little cigarette butt right there. Might want to composite out. All right. So I've got that. I need to extend it longer still, so I use my shot. And now I want to take my shot and move it within this format. That will get rid of the cigarette butt. Use the arrow keys to nudge it a little bit. Got to keep the width though. So I might stretch it slightly. You do what you need to do to match the shot, to fill the space. Okay, so that's matching pretty well. Now I want to erase away from it. If I do it carefully with a soft enough edge, I'll transition that shadow under his feet onto this new surface. It's all about paying attention to edges and exposures, and I'll probably have to do a little bit of dodging and burning to fix it. So for instance, well, I'll get to it, but I'll dodge that edge in my background.